I was living with my mom in a small rental house in the Midwest. It wasn't rural, mostly families, some older people who'd been there forever, a couple of houses that always seemed empty even though the lights came on sometimes. It was the kind of place where nothing really happened, which is probably why my mom liked it. My dad wasn't around. He'd left years earlier, and it was just the two of us. My mom worked long hours, mostly evenings, and I spent a lot of time by myself after school. I stayed in my room a lot. It faced the side of the house with a window that looked out toward the neighbor's fence and a narrow strip of yard. Nothing special. I slept with the window cracked most nights because my room got stuffy. Life was normal. School, homework, frozen dinners if my mom worked late, TV on weekends. I didn't have a lot of friends over, but that wasn't unusual for me. I felt safe there. I don't remember being scared of the house or the neighborhood before any of this happened. The first thing was small enough that I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. I was in my room one evening, sitting on my bed with the lights on, reading or drawing. I honestly don't remember which. I just remember looking up toward the window because something moved in my peripheral vision. When I turned my head, there was a man right outside my window, not standing across the yard, right up at the glass. I don't know how long he'd been there before I noticed him. That part still bothers me. He was close enough that I could see his face. He wasn't wearing anything strange, just a dark jacket and a hat. His face looked normal, but his expression wasn't. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't angry either, just focused, like he was watching something specific. We made eye contact for maybe a second. Then he stepped back and ran. He turned and ran fast, disappearing past the fence line and out of sight. I stayed on my bed for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I wasn't screaming or anything. I think I was more confused than scared at first. Then I went and got my mom. She took it seriously enough to come look. She checked the yard, the side of the house, even walked a little way down the street. There was nobody there. No footprints that she noticed. Nothing disturbed. She told me it was someone cutting through yards or looking for a lost dog. She said people do weird things sometimes and not to think about it too much. I tried not to. For a few days, I kept the curtains closed at night, but that was it. Then a few nights later, I woke up because I needed to use the bathroom. It was late. The house was dark. I sat up in bed and I saw someone standing inside my room. At first, my brain didn't register it as danger. It was more like seeing a coat hanging somewhere it shouldn't be, a shape that didn't belong. The man was near the foot of my bed, close enough that I could see his outline. He was facing me. I don't know how long he'd been there. I don't know how he got inside. The window was open, but the screen was still in place, at least from what I remember later. He moved toward me, and I saw something in his hand. It took a moment to understand it was a knife. Not a big one, but big enough. I didn't think. I slid off the bed and ran. I don't remember screaming until I was already in the hallway. I ran straight to my mom's room and turned on the light. She woke up confused and angry until she saw my face and heard what I was saying. She got up and grabbed the phone from the nightstand, but she didn't dial anything. She told me to stay behind her. By the time we went back to my room, the man was gone. The window was open wider than before. The screen was pushed out and lying in the grass outside. My mom checked every room in the house, every closet, the front and back doors. She locked everything and sat with me until morning. I told her we needed to call the police. I kept saying it. She said we'd talk about it in the morning. Morning came, and she didn't call. She said there was no proof. She said he was gone, and that calling the police would just cause trouble. She said they'd ask questions she didn't want to answer. That part didn't make sense to me then. It still doesn't. I stayed home from school that day. My mom made arrangements for me to stay with her sister. It was supposed to be temporary, a few days, maybe a week. It turned into years. I lived with my aunt until I was an adult. My mom said it was safer that way. She never talked about that night again. When I tried to bring it up, she shut it down, changed the subject, acted like I was making things bigger than they were. We never called the police. Nobody ever followed up. Nothing else happened at the house after I left, at least not that I was told. I'm grown now. I've thought about it a lot, about the man at the window, about how he got inside, about why my mom was so quick to move me out, but so unwilling to involve anyone else. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. And I don't know why the person who should have protected me most made the choices she did. Something happened in that house, and whatever it was, it ended my childhood. I was 26 at the time, a year out of nursing school, still getting used to the idea that this was my job now. I'd taken a night position at a small assisted living facility in a rural part of the state, about 40 minutes from where I was renting a basement apartment. It wasn't where I pictured myself ending up, but the pay was good, the staff turnover was low, and nights worked better for me than days. I liked the slower pace and the feeling that most of the world was asleep while I was working. The facility itself was old but not abandoned looking. It had been added onto in stages over the decades, so the layout wasn't perfectly logical. Long carpeted hallways, low ceilings in some wings, higher ones in others. During the day it felt busy and a little cramped. At night it felt larger. Not eerie exactly, just spread out and quiet in a way you don't notice until you're the only one moving through it. Most nights followed the same pattern. Medication rounds, charting, checking rooms, responding to call lights. The residents slept lightly and often needed reassurance more than anything else. We had a skeleton crew overnight, usually me, another nurse, and one aide. On the night this happened, the other nurse had called out sick, so it was just me and an aide named Marlene, who'd worked there longer than anyone and knew the building better than the blueprints. There was one hallway that stayed locked all the time. It was on the oldest side of the building, a short corridor with 6 rooms that hadn't been used in years. I was told during orientation that the rooms didn't meet updated regulations and had been closed off permanently. The door at the entrance of the hall was solid, with a keypad and a physical lock. Housekeeping didn't go down there. Maintenance only did inspections once or twice a year. As far as my job went, it might as well not have existed. I didn't think much about it. Everyone has restricted areas at work. It wasn't treated like a secret, just a closed section of the building. That night had been uneventful. I'd finished my last med pass around 2 a.m. and was heading back toward the nurses' station with my cart. I took the longer route because one resident had a habit of wandering, and I liked to pass her room every half hour or so. That route took me past the locked hallway door. I was a few steps past it when I heard crying. It sounded like someone trying not to be heard. My first thought was that a resident had gotten up and was disoriented. The sound seemed to be coming from behind me, from the direction of the locked hallway. I stopped and listened. It continued. Soft, uneven, definitely a woman. I turned around and walked back toward the door. I checked the keypad out of habit, even though I knew I didn't have access. The crying wasn't coming through the door itself. It sounded farther down, like it was already inside the hallway. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to make sense of it. Residents couldn't get in there. Staff couldn't either, unless they had specific clearance. I thought about Marlene, wondered if she was playing some kind of joke, but that didn't fit her at all. She wasn't that kind of person, and she was supposed to be on the opposite wing. I raised my voice and asked if someone needed help. The crying stopped. After a second or two, footsteps started, coming toward the door. My stomach tightened, but I still assumed there was a rational explanation. Maybe maintenance had let someone in earlier and forgotten to log it. Maybe a family member had wandered somewhere they weren't supposed to be. I leaned closer to the narrow window set into the door. A woman walked into view. She was wearing what looked like an old-style hospital gown, pale blue, thin fabric. Her hair was gray and pulled back loosely. She walked like someone unsteady but not confused, one hand trailing along the wall as if for balance. Her face was turned slightly downward, so I couldn't see her clearly at first. I knocked on the door and called out again, telling her she needed to stop and that the area was closed. She lifted her head. Her eyes met mine through the glass, and I felt something shift in me that I still don't have a good word for. She didn't look frightened or angry. She looked exhausted, worn down in a way that went past emotion. Her mouth opened like she was going to speak. That's the last clear thing I have from that moment. Everything after that is missing. There's no blur, no sense of falling. It just cuts out. The next thing I was aware of was movement and noise, a rhythmic bumping sensation, someone saying my name over and over. I opened my eyes to bright lights in the inside of an ambulance. My head hurt badly and my tongue felt thick in my mouth. They told me I'd collapsed. Marlene had found me on the floor near the locked hallway door during her rounds. I was unconscious and wouldn't respond, so she called 911. At the hospital, they ran tests. Blood work, CT scan, cardiac monitoring. Everything came back normal. Dehydration was suggested. Stress. A vasovagal response. No one seemed alarmed once I was awake and oriented. I asked Marlene later if she'd seen anyone else nearby when she found me. She said no. Just me and my cart tipped on its side. When I mentioned hearing someone crying and seeing a woman in the closed hallway, the conversation changed. She told me gently that no one had access to that area. She also said very carefully that the 6 rooms had been empty longer than she'd worked there. I pressed her on it another day, off the clock. Asked if anyone had ever died down there. She hesitated, then said people had lived in those rooms decades ago, back when the building was still partly a long-term care hospital. She didn't offer more, and I didn't push. I went back to work after a few days. I avoided that route at night. The locked door stayed locked. There was no more crying, no reports from other staff. Administration brushed it off as a medical episode on my part, and officially that's all it was. I didn't quit right away. I needed the job. But something had shifted for me. I was more tired than I should have been. Small noises set me on edge. I kept thinking about the look on that woman's face, the way she'd been walking toward the door like she expected it to open. I left the facility 3 months later for a position at a larger hospital in the city. I told people it was for career growth, which was true enough. I don't know who that woman was. I don't know if she was anyone at all. There was no record, no incident report, nothing to point to. I still don't have an explanation for why I lost consciousness the way I did. I was in my mid-20s at the time, working a seasonal contract job that had me and a small group of coworkers staying together in a rented house for a few weeks. It was in a rural area, far enough out that everything felt slower. Fields, narrow roads, long gaps between houses. None of us were from there. We were only there because the job required it, and the company handled the lodging. The house was old but not falling apart. 2 stories, wide porch, creaky floors in places that didn't really make sense. What made it unusual, and what everyone commented on right away, was the cemetery. It was on the property, not directly in the yard, but close enough that you could see headstones from the side of the house if you looked out the right window. It wasn't fenced off, just a cluster of old graves under trees, some leaning, some so worn you couldn't read the names. At first, it didn't bother me. I grew up around old places, and I wasn't particularly sensitive about that kind of thing. The cemetery was there before the house, or at least that's what we were told. Locals still came by occasionally to visit graves. It felt strange, but not threatening. Life in the house was pretty normal. We worked long days, came back tired, cooked together, complained about the same things. People paired off to watch shows or sit outside. Nothing felt off in a way I could point to. The house was just old. One night, a few days into staying there, I stepped outside to take a phone call. The signal inside was bad, and it was one of those calls I didn't want everyone overhearing. It was already dark, but not late. I stood near the side of the house, facing away from the cemetery, pacing a little while I talked. I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. I assumed it was one of my coworkers coming out for a smoke or to tell me something. I didn't turn around right away. The steps were steady, close enough that I moved slightly to the side to give them room to pass. Someone walked past me. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a shape, close enough that I felt the shift in air. But when I turned my head, there was no one there. The path beside the house didn't lead anywhere you could disappear to that quickly. It was open. No trees right there, no doors, no shadows deep enough to hide a person. I stood there holding my phone, the person on the other end still talking, and I scanned the yard, the side of the house, the direction of the cemetery. Nothing. I cut the call short without really explaining why, and went back inside. My heart was beating harder than it should have been, but I told myself it was just surprise. Maybe someone moved faster than I thought. Maybe I missed them going around the corner. I didn't say anything to anyone because it sounded stupid even in my own head. I went to my room and closed the door, and I started hearing a woman's voice. It sounded like someone speaking from another room or maybe from outside, but the words didn't carry clearly. I couldn't make out what she was saying. It was more like the shape of speech than actual sentences. I sat on my bed listening. I checked the hallway. Everyone else seemed settled. Doors closed, quiet. The voice would stop, then start again. Always the same distance away. Never clearer. I lay down eventually, telling myself it was someone on a phone call, or maybe sound carrying strangely through the house. Old houses do that. I didn't sleep much, but I must have drifted off at some point. I woke up suddenly and didn't know why. The room was dark, but not completely. Moonlight came in through the window. I felt unsettled in a way that was hard to pin down, like waking up from a dream you can't remember, but your body still reacts to it. I heard the woman again, closer, or maybe just clearer. Still no words I could understand, just the sense of someone talking. I got out of bed and walked toward the window, thinking someone was outside. From where I stood, I could see part of the yard and farther back the edge of the cemetery. Everything looked still. As I leaned closer to the glass, my own reflection became more visible, and behind me in the reflection was a woman. She stood close. Close enough that if she were real, I would have felt her. Her outline was faint, not sharply defined, like the reflection wasn't fully catching her. I couldn't see her face, just long hair and the suggestion of a dress or something hanging loosely. My brain tried to fill in explanations faster than my body could react. One of my coworkers playing a joke, someone standing in the doorway behind me. I turned around. The room was empty. I screamed. It just came out of me. I ran into the hallway, yelling, half crying, knocking on doors. People came out confused and half asleep. I tried to explain what I saw, but the words didn't come out cleanly. I kept pointing back toward my room like something might still be there. No one saw anything. They checked the room, the windows, outside. Nothing. One of my coworkers stayed with me the rest of the night. I didn't go back into my room alone. We slept on opposite sides of the bed, fully dressed, lights on. I didn't hear the voice again, but I didn't really sleep either. The next day, someone mentioned, casually, that the house was known to be haunted. They said it like it was a joke, like local trivia. Apparently the property had a history. Deaths connected to the land. Stories people told but didn't write down anywhere official. I never went outside alone at night after that. We left a few weeks later when the job ended. I didn't take anything from that room with me. Not because I thought it was cursed. It just didn't feel right. I don't try to explain it anymore. I know what I saw in that reflection, and I know what I didn't see when I turned around.